Okay, here's the video where I want to show you how to find the inverse functions. Before we do find the inverse functions, let's go ahead and figure out what an inverse function is. If you have a set of numbers in the input and a set of numbers in the output, the way we connect them is through a function. A function takes us from the input to the output. We call it a function. And we normally write f of x for function. It could be a g of x or h of x, but it's a function and it takes us from the input to the output. Now to go back from the output into the input like this, we call it an inverse function. And the notation that we use for an inverse function is usually f with a, it looks like a -1 exponent, but it's not. It's called the inverse function. So to go from the input to the output, we use a function. To go from the output back into the input, we call the inverse. Now, how do we find an inverse function? There's 4 easy steps, and I'm just gonna box them right now. You can pause the video and copy them. But this first step is to change f of x to a y. Second step, we're gonna switch the x and the y. Step number 3, we're gonna solve for y. And step number 4, we're just gonna call it f inverse. So take a look at an example number 1 here. To find the inverse of the function, first thing we're going to do is change that f of x into a y. So step 1 is super simple. Just change f of x into a y. Step 2 is also very simple. You change x into a y and y into an x. So just switch them. Step 3 is the one that might take a little longer. We need to solve for y, so let's go ahead and start by subtracting 5 from both sides. And finally, let's divide both sides by -2. Now we have y, because the 2's divide out. We have y equals x minus 5 over -2. It turns out this is the end of step 3. And then step 4 is to just rename it. Instead of calling it y, we're going to call it f inverse. X minus 5 over -2. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the inverse of the function given to us. Okay, let's take a look at another example. It's the same steps, except the problems look different. Step 1, I don't have to write it down, but step 1 is to change f of x into a y. Step 2 is to just switch the x and the y. Step 3 is to solve for y, so we're going to multiply both sides by 2 to start with. And then we're going to get 2x equals y minus 3 because the 2's divide out. And then adding 3 to both sides, we're going to get that 2x, I'll take it over here, 2x plus 3 equals y. And the last step is to rename that y. That y is actually the inverse. And here's the inverse of that function. Okay, example number 3, very similar. Again, step 1, change f of x to y. Step 2, switch the x and the y. Step 3, let's solve for y. In this case, I'm going to solve for y by multiplying everything by 2. So I get 2x. The 2 and the 2 divide out here, and we're going to get -3y. And when we multiply 1/2 by 2, the 1/2 of 2 becomes 1. And then solving for y here, similar to the previous example. Let's divide both sides by -3. And you get that y equals 2x minus 1 over negative 3. And so finally the inverse then is 2x minus 1 over negative 3. Okay, final example here. Let's go ahead and find the inverse the same way. Step 1, change y, f of x into a y. Switch the x and the y. Solve for y. Let's go ahead and solve for y by adding 8 to both sides. Oops. X plus 8. And in order for us to cancel that cubic root, we're going to raise both sides to the third power. Don't worry, we're not going to multiply that x plus 8 to the third power. We're just going to leave it as it is. So finally, that y becomes f inverse. And here's how you find the inverse. Please feel free to watch this video again and pause it if you need to, take notes. And I hope you understand how to find the inverse of a function and what an inverse, and actually you know what an inverse is. Okay, I'll see you next time.